I want you to picture a specific kind of uncomfortable moment. You're in a high-stakes meeting.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe a project just imploded, or a client is furious, and the room is loud, people are venting, they're interrupting each other, basically just trying to throw out solutions to stop the bleeding. It is chaotic.
It's the standard panic response. I mean, everyone just wants to be seen doing something, anything.
Exactly. But then you look across the table, and there is one person who is, well, they're silent, completely still. They aren't arguing, they aren't typing furiously, they are just sitting there. And if you're the type of person who likes to solve things fast, that silence is infuriating. You think, hello? Are you even here? Do you not care that the building is on fire?
To the casual observer, yeah, it looks like they've frozen. Or worse, like they've just checked out entirely and given up.
But today, we are going to completely flip that assumption on its head. Because according to the research we have, that person hasn't checked out at all. They are actually the busiest person in the room. They're just running an operating system that the rest of us can't hear.
I love that analogy. That silence isn't emptiness. It's the sound of a massive amount of data being processed at high speed.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're opening up the files on the Max Energy ME80 personality system. It's this fascinating framework that maps human behavior based on energy flow rather than just your standard social traits. And we are zooming in on one specific, rather rare code, the WWWU.
Right, also known as the inner insight seeker.
And our mission today for you listening is to decode that silence. We need to figure out why they go quiet, what is happening in that sort of black box of a brain, and why, honestly, if you're running a business or even a family, you might actually need that exact silence to survive.
It's a journey into a very deep, very internal world.
So let's start with the headline. In the ME80 system, every profile has a core declaration, kind of a hero quote. What is the banner for the WWWU?
The definition is incredibly evocative. It says dissects shocks in silence, turning inner realizations into stable structures.
Dissects shocks in silence. That really suggests that when something hits them, a crisis, a surprise, some sort of negation, their first instinct isn't to bounce it back. It's to swallow it.
Precisely. And this is exactly where the friction happens in the real world. Most of society operates on a ping-pong model of communication. I say something, you immediately say something back. But the inner insight seeker operates on a digestive model.
A digestive model.
Yeah, when they face impact or complex change, the source material says they complete cognitive leaps and system recalibration amid silence.
Okay, but let's play devil's advocate for a second. In a modern workplace, digestive sounds a whole lot like slow. I mean, if I send a Slack message and I don't get a reply for 3 hours, I'm going to assume you're ignoring me or you just don't know the answer.
And that right there is the primary misunderstanding this type faces. The report explicitly states they're often misread as having a slow response or being hard to approach. But here is the nuance. They aren't delaying for the sake of delaying. They are inspecting assumptions.
Inspecting assumptions. Walk me through that.
Think of it this way. When a fire alarm goes off, most people run to grab a bucket of water. The WWWU pauses to check if the building's sprinkler system is actually connected to the water main. They're looking for the root logic before they expend any energy on a reaction.
Ah, so they trade speed for accuracy.
They exchange speed for structural stability. Their entire control mechanism, their philosophy is recalibration. They don't want to put a Band-Aid on the problem for today. They want to stabilize the system so the problem never happens tomorrow.
Which is insanely valuable, but I imagine it's incredibly stressful for the people tapping their feet, just waiting on them to say yes or no.
Oh, absolutely. It requires a lot of patience from everyone else. But the payoff is that when they finally do speak, the solution is usually bulletproof.
So let's look at the mechanics of this. How does this actually work inside their head? The ME80 system talks about an energy matrix, right?
Yes. So the ME80 isn't just a simple introvert versus extrovert binary. It maps how energy flows through different processing layers. And for the WWWU, the report describes them as extremely introverted.
Extremely is a pretty strong word there.
In this context, it means their energy is almost entirely hoarded and directed toward three things: logic calculation, deep analysis, and foundational structure correction. They do not spend energy outwardly.
Okay, and the system breaks this down into three core layers: IP, IQ, and EQ. Now, usually when I hear IQ and EQ, I think of standard intelligence and emotional intelligence. But the Max Energy system defines these differently?
Very differently. These are sequential stages of processing. To really understand the inner insight seeker, we have to walk through these layers one by one.
Let's do it. Let's start with the first layer, IP. This is the inner value layer.
For the WWWU, this layer is defined as risk perception activation.
That sounds like a home security system.
It basically is. It's an always-on radar. Before a conversation even gets tense, or a project plan even shows signs of failing, the WWWU feels a tremor. They have this heightened sensitivity to potential instability. Think of a submarine using sonar. They are constantly pinging the environment for invisible threats.
So while everyone else is, I don't know, staring at the shiny new sales pitch, the WWW is in the corner looking at the cracks in the foundation.
Exactly. And all that raw data feeds into the second layer, IQ. In this system, that is the emotional activation layer. But for this specific profile, it's defined as risk and consequence judgment.
Wait, their emotional layer is judging risk. That seems contradictory. Usually we think of emotions as kind of irrational or highly reactive.
And that is their superpower. Their emotional arousal isn't tied to I feel happy or I feel sad. It's directly tied to the evaluation of fallout. They are emotionally triggered by the consequences of a decision. They process the chain reaction. If we do A, then B happens, which naturally causes C.
So they're basically playing 4D chess with their feelings.
In a way, yes. If they feel anxiety, it's almost always because they have calculated a future failure that no one else in the room sees yet.
Which perfectly leads us to the third layer, EQ, the decision calculation layer.
Right. And for them, this is emotional perception and resonance.
Okay, resonance sounds a bit more like standard empathy.
It is, but with a highly logical twist. They do perceive the room's emotions. They completely resonate with the anxiety or the anger happening in that chaotic meeting. But, and this is the crucial part, they use that emotional data as a variable in their logic equation. They do not necessarily mirror it back to you.
Wow, that totally explains the stone face. They feel the room, but they don't show the room that they feel it.
Correct. They are calculating the emotional cost right alongside the financial or operational cost.
Which brings us to the manifestation layer. This is how their energy actually shows up to the outside world. And for the WWWU, the direction of flow is 100% inward.
The report uses 3 specific verbs here that really stuck with me: carrying, absorbing, and integrating.
It paints a picture of a vault, doesn't it? Or maybe a sponge.
A sponge is a perfect analogy.
Carrying feels heavy, though. It implies they are literally holding the weight of the entire situation inside themselves.
Because they are. They take in the chaos, the bad data, the emotional venting of all their colleagues, and they hold it. They absorb it all. And they absolutely will not let it leak back out until they have integrated it into a coherent solution.
This leads us to what the report calls their deep trait, and it's titled Introspective Reconstruction. This sounds like a really heavy-duty cognitive process.
It's the core of their genius, but it's also their biggest burden. The report says they view every shock or failure as precious thinking material.
Precious thinking material. I love that phrase, but I also kind of hate it. It means you can't just let a mistake go. You have to dissect it.
You have to replay the tape. And the WWU replays the tape over and over again. They require solitude for this. They need to retreat into a quiet room and just sit with the data.
But they aren't just wallowing in it, right?
No, not at all. And this is critical. They aren't replaying the event to find someone to blame. They aren't asking, why was John so rude in that meeting? Or why am I so stupid?
So what are they asking?
They are asking, what structural gap allowed this error to occur in the first place? They strip away all those surface-level right or wrong judgments, and they look for causal connections. They want to find the bug in the code.
So they're debugging reality.
Yes. The entire goal is to avoid what the report calls ineffective repetitive depletion.
Which is just fancy talk for making the same stupid mistake twice.
Exactly. They figure if they can reconstruct their mental model of the situation, they can ensure the error never happens again. They're essentially building a better trap.
But there has to be a cost to this. You can't just be a sponge for risk and chaos and not have it take a toll on you. And looking at the shadow blind spot section of the report, it looks pretty intense.
It is intense. The shadow here is called inward pressure collection. The core habit is described as all problems are first placed in the heart.
Oof. That is poetic, but it sounds incredibly painful. Placed in the heart.
It implies immense hidden pressure. Because they don't vent, remember, their energy flow is entirely inward. They digest everything internally. The logic, the risk, the raw emotion, and this leads to a very strong natural inclination towards self-criticism.
So while they're sitting in that meeting looking completely calm and detached, they might actually be beating themselves up for missing a tiny variable.
Frequently. They're constantly raising the standards for themselves, and because they are so quiet about it, nobody offers to help them carry the load. People just assume they're fine because they look so stable.
This has to create a weird dynamic in their relationships. The report calls their social style quiet distance.
It's a perfect description of how they operate socially. They prefer low noise, deep discussion environments.
No, I'm guessing small talk is torture.
Absolute torture.
Yeah.
They don't want to talk about the weather. They want to deconstruct the climate patterns. If you want to bond with an inner insight seeker, you have to be willing to dive deep.
But there's a trap here, described as the emotion annotation gap. This is something I think a lot of partners or friends of this type probably struggle with. What exactly is that gap?
Think about how we usually signal empathy to each other. If you tell me you had a terrible day, I frown. I say, oh no, that's awful, I'm so sorry. I annotate the emotion so you know I'm actively with you.
Right. I perform the reaction, I show you the label.
Well, the inner insight seeker feels your pain. Remember, they have that EQ resonance, but they often completely skip the annotation. They don't perform the reaction. They just absorb the information and immediately start calculating how to fix the root cause of your bad day.
So I might pour my heart out to them, and they just stare at me. And I'm thinking, wow, cold.
Right, when in reality, they're deeply analyzing how to help you. But because they don't give that immediate emotional feedback, the report says the temperature of relationships gradually descends.
Trust without warmth. That is a very specific, almost heavy flavor of a relationship.
It is. They provide reliable stability. You know they will never lie to you, and you know they will never panic in a crisis. But you might not feel close to them in that traditional warm and fuzzy sense.
Okay, so maybe they aren't the life of the party. But let's pivot to where this profile really wins, because if I'm hearing all this right, in a complex business environment, this person is an absolute secret weapon.
Massive value.
Yeah.
Their core business advantage is defined as structure insight.
How does that actually apply on a day-to-day basis?
In a chaotic corporate environment, data is flying everywhere. Most people get totally distracted by the noise. The WWU has the unique ability to ignore the noise and extract the key variables. They convert occasional errors into system upgrades.
Oh, they're the ones you say, guys, we don't have a sales problem, we have a workflow problem.
Precisely. They use models and frameworks to stabilize operations. The report notes that their modifications might look small from the outside. Maybe a tweak to a rule here, a minor change in process there, but these changes create far-reaching foundational impact. Specifically, they massively reduce organizational internal friction.
They make the machine run smoother, usually without anyone even realizing who grabbed the oil can.
That's exactly it. They fix the engine while everyone else is complaining about the paint job.
So if I'm a hiring manager, where do I put a WWWU to get the most out of them? I assume I don't put them in frontline sales.
Definitely not. You don't put them in a role requiring rapid-fire, shallow social interaction. You put them in top-level design.
Like system architecture?
System architecture, long-term governance planning, roles where the cost of an error is incredibly high. They're also perfect for rule reshaping.
Meaning what, exactly?
Organizational institution establishment. Process optimization engineering. They are the best people to write the rule book because, again, they see the loopholes and the risks before anyone else does.
The report also recommends strict risk control.
Compliance, logic design, risk management. If you need someone to look at a 5-year strategic plan and tell you exactly how it will fail in year 3, ask an inner insight seeker.
And finally, it lists deep research.
Strategy planning, trend analysis, anything that requires constructing a stable, logical model out of pure chaos.
It's really a lesson in valuing different types of contribution. It is so easy to overlook the quiet people in the room or to view them as passive, but this deep dive suggests that silence is where the actual structural integrity of a company lives.
It's a great reminder that silence isn't empty. For the inner insight seeker, silence is a workspace. It's where the real work gets done.
I want to wrap up with a final thought from the source material that I found really striking. It summarizes this whole paradox perfectly. It says, when rules are quietly rewritten by their hands, systems journey unquietly towards safer, more durable futures.
Systems journey unquietly. I really love that phrasing. The person is quiet, but the impact of their work resonates incredibly loudly.
So here is the takeaway for you listening. If you have a WWU in your life, or maybe if you recognize yourself in this description, stop trying to force the ping-pong conversation. Respect the digestive process.
Appreciate the pause. It is not a malfunction. It's just an upgrade in progress.
And if you want to understand that upgrade process better, this deep dive was based on the Max Energy ME80 Personality Assessment Report. It goes into so much more detail about how these inner energies interact and manifest.
There is so much more depth to this system. It really does change how you view the people working and living around you.
You can find more information at their official website. That's www.maxenergylife.com, or you can search on Facebook. The specific search terms for their pages are Max Energy Ju Nang Liang Ren Ji Zhu, or you can also search Men Energy Nang Liang Ren Ji Xin Liju.
It's definitely worth checking out.
We will put those links and the exact spelling of those search terms right in the show notes for you. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Always a pleasure.
Catch you on the next one.